So, so let's get down to this. So, all right. So I wanted to talk about mental health because I keep hearing every time a discussion comes up about a tragic event, about a mass shooting, about suicide, about even during COVID, when COVID was going on, there was a lot of complaints about the the reality of our mental health system, that it's inadequate, that it doesn't work well, um, it's insufficient, and a lot of people don't have access to our mental health system. So this was something that I kind of wanted to talk about, and it does feel like every time I observe a discussion about the issue, um, people say that it's important, that we need to address it, that there's all these problems, but they don't do anything to actually come up with options to work on it. So, so if we know there's a problem, but we don't want to put forth any ideas on how to fix it or what to do about it, then I feel that that needs to be a first step. That needs to be something that we initially talk about and figure out. That we, like, if it's not even aired, then how are we even going to address the issue at all? So that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about mental health. I want to talk about our inability to seem to be able to do anything about it. We know there's a problem. We know there's many problems. We keep talking about the many problems, but we don't seem to come forth with ideas on how to deal with it. And I was thinking about this the other day when I was thinking I should do a topic on mental health, but how do I approach it? Because, like I said, every time we talk about it, it's there's a problem, something needs to be done, but nobody comes up with something. So I'm like, well, what could be done? What could be done? And so I thought, um, my thoughts on the matter is, what if we were to try uh, free universal mental health care? And I know last time I did a stream, I said some people would probably think that's crazy. They would probably think that's not a good idea. And I say that because um, because we've been through this with regular health care, the idea of a universal health care system, and then people get all upset that that's not going to work, that it's socialism. There's a lot of stigma around socialism. And there's also a lot of misunderstanding about what socialism actually is. So that was my main concern with this idea. If you come up with an idea of free mental health care, then um, then are people going to say that that's just not going to work? We don't have the money, we don't have the resources, we don't have the ability to take care of something like that. And I like to think that if we really, really worked at it, if we really, really, you know, got some good ideas out and really, really worked at it, that's something that we could tackle, and that maybe we could at least entertain the idea that that might be something that we might be able to at least discuss and see if it could be something that that could help with some of the problems that we have today in our mental health system. And I'm not talking about in other countries, I'm talking about here in America. And here in America, I feel like there's several specific problems with our mental health system and people not having access to it. Um, and and also with a great deal of stigma that exists when it comes to mental health care. If you go to see a therapist or a counselor or even a guidance counselor, then often people think that there must be something wrong with you. Um, and and a lot of people look down on those things that they think might be wrong with you. So so it just feels so bad to even acknowledge that you might need help is something that a lot of people look down upon. They don't even want to consider. And the idea of actually going in to talk to somebody because you feel like you need help, that's even worse. Like, a lot of people don't want to do that. I'm not one of those people. I have gone to therapists many times, um, and not because I'm crazy, um, but because I have had bouts of anxiety. I have had bouts of depression, and and for me, I feel like I know myself well enough to know when I need a little bit of help, when I need somebody there to say, look, it's going to be okay. What you're going through is normal, and these are some steps that you can take to help you deal with it. All right. So I'm going to ask all of you um, what you think. Do you think that free universal healthcare could work? I'm going to put it in the comments section um, so that if you arrive here later, maybe you could go through the comments section, see the questions that I put, and answer it if you want to. So let's put that in here. I'm going to try putting it in YouTube also. I don't know how well that'll work, but I'm going to try. Even though it says there's no video, I'll still put it in my audio section. Later on, I will try to download the video um, and uh, and load it onto YouTube. I'm not sure how well that'll work, but I will try to do that and see what happens. All right, so it's in my comment section on YouTube. We'll see if anybody actually goes on there and answers. All right, now, so yeah, could free universal healthcare, mental health care, actually work in this country? Um, what are your views on that? Okay, so as I was talking about before, some of the problems I think that exist in our current mental health system: inability for people to access it. If you're poor, if you live in a rural area, if you are a person who's isolated for whatever reason, accessing that kind of care can be very, very difficult, very challenging. Okay, my Facebook is saying community standards. I will have to check that out later and see what is going on about, because I did not feel like anything I was talking about so far has been against their community standards, but who knows? Let's see. These policies come from feedback from people on Facebook and the advice of experts. These policies include different views and beliefs and are especially meant to protect those who might otherwise be overlooked or marginalized. Bullying and harassment keep everyone respected and welcome by avoiding doing things that threaten or bully another. I certainly hope I have not done that. Hate speech. People should be protected, especially from attacks on their race, ethnicity, religion, language, gender, or sexuality. And I really hope I'm not doing that. It just says I understand. So hopefully it's just asking me if I get those standards and if I am okay with it. So yes, I understand. It's not removing it. So anyway, let's go on. So challenges with their healthcare, inability to access. Maybe you don't have the money. Maybe you don't have the resources. Maybe you have to work and you have to pay for your cost of living, and taking the time from work in order to access mental health care um, is more than you're able to do. Maybe you live in an area that doesn't have enough mental health therapy. Maybe you live in an area where you don't have the right kind of mental health therapy. Maybe you are in an isolated group, or a particularly vulnerable group where you need a specific type of mental health care. You need a specific type of therapist that has been properly trained um, to work with your community, to work with your issues, or to work with your challenges. And there are many areas, even in some places where it seems like they have plenty of therapists and plenty of coverage and plenty of understanding of diverse issues. Even in some places like those, it can be very difficult to access certain types of mental health care for specific challenges and for specific populations. So that's another area that we have major challenges with. There's also inadequate training, frankly, in some areas that I believe really should have comprehensive training for any mental health therapist. Um, yet when you check schooling curriculum for people that are being trained for that, um, there is little or nothing that is actually being covered in some schools that are training therapists to do their job. So that is another area where there's a lack of access. All right. Okay, so I'm going to ask another question. How could a free system be helpful or harmful? So think about that, because I know everybody has their own opinion about things like this. And we all think a little differently. We all have our own ideas. So think about how you feel. What do you think could be problematic about healthcare, about a free healthcare system for mental health, and what do you think could be helpful about it? And I'll go ahead and post that question into my comments section. All right. Paste. And I'll go ahead and post it into my YouTube, even though there is no video actually going on my YouTube account. Hopefully next week we'll get that fixed. I just don't understand why it's still a problem. Okay, there we go. How could a free system be helpful or harmful? Okay. Charity, thank you for your comment. I think it can, with careful thought and planning. And I agree with you there. I think with a lot of careful thought and planning that it could be a helpful accommodation to help take care of some of the problems that exist in our healthcare system. All right. All right. Oh, it looks like I got another question. Okay, so what about the way that healthcare is done? Systematically and individually, do you think needs to be addressed? So I wanted this to be like a second part to the previous question. How could a free system be helpful or harmful? So the second part to that question would be, what about our current system, about the way that it's done systematically and individually? do you think needs to be addressed? Okay, so I'll go ahead and put that in my comments section. Copy, paste. And I do tend to like repeat the things I'm doing out loud. It's just something I do. So there we go. All right. Now, okay. Okay, so what I was thinking about for how we could make something like this work, like Charity said, it's something that we would need a lot of careful thought and planning. I think it would need to be comprehensive. Um, some of the things that I was thinking that we could use some kind of step system, which I think sort of exists already, but I would want it more encompassing. So, so have like the first step would be just for general mental health. It's not necessarily you have any problem or issue that you feel like you need to go to a therapist about. Maybe it's just general everyday stress. Um, maybe it's just having a little check-in to see how you're doing. Maybe it's getting through some of those um, periods in your life where it's just a little too stressful, or you're in the process of moving, or your job is changing or something like that. Is you have just somebody that you could go to. And I was thinking it could be like for simple mental health care like this, you could have people that are in your place of employment that you could go to when you need to, as long as you're not, as long as you don't have to be working at the time, that you could take some time to go and go see a counselor or therapist or somebody that is specifically there just to deal with simple challenges and issues to at that first level of care. Um, you could also have them at schools, and I know there are plenty of places of employment and plenty of schools that already do this. Okay, but this is something that I would want it to be free. I would want it to be readily available to everybody. And I would want there to be a good focus on reducing the stigma that exists when it comes to actually going to talk to a therapist or going to talk to somebody about mental health. Um, something where it could be something that we use regularly as just part of our regular health care, that we don't look at as something that you only do this when you have something wrong, or you only use this option when you can't figure it out yourself. That's not what I'm talking about. In this position, I would be talking about things that you're just trying to get through some of the regular everyday roller coaster stuff that goes on in everybody's everyday life. Um, and I was thinking that if you made it so that uh, it's easier to get this level of employment, because one of the things that I was looking at when it comes to becoming a mental health therapist, becoming a counselor in almost any field, um, when when I started looking at leaving the education field, because I actually came from education, from public education. When I started considering that, I looked at my degree, which was in social science, arts, and um, and early education, and I wanted to find out if there was a way that I could, that I could use what I already had to go into another field. And I really liked the idea of social sciences. I really liked the idea of helping people out, being a counselor, a therapist, a guidance counselor, a domestic violence counselor, an advocate, a what I ended up doing, a substance abuse counselor. I did do that for a while. So when I looked at that and I looked at the degree that I have, I looked at the experience that I had and looked at the jobs that I was finding in those areas, and almost every single one of them, they wanted at least a master's degree. And I did not have a master's degree. I had a bachelor's degree. So I'm like, okay, I have to do a master's degree. I go look at the colleges that are in my area. I'm married. I am settled down here in Florida, and I am not going to be able to just pick up and leave and go to another school. I'm not going to entertain the idea of trying to do that. So I have to go to schools that are in the area. And I also found that a lot of those jobs, some of them, they want you to specifically have a doctorate in psychology. Some of them want you to have a specific degree in as a social worker. But a lot of them required one of three degrees, a master's in one of these three social sciences: psychology, social work, or sociology. And I personally, I love sociology, so that's what I did. I got a sociology degree, a master's in applied sociology at the University of Central Florida. Um, and I went from there into, I did do like a little stint doing COVID screenings at the courthouse. And then after that, I worked as a substance abuse counselor. But for this, I would think that we should be able to find some jobs that are for that first level of care, that just simple needs, where those people can have a bachelor's degree, or maybe even an AA degree, or maybe even a certification, where they can have specific training for dealing with those for that low level of mental health care, and a specific comprehensive training on identifying those more difficult areas, for identifying those challenges that maybe that person needs a higher level of care. So if they're comprehensively trained to identify the need for more um, a more high level of care, or if they are comprehensively trained to identify specific issues that need a specific type of mental health therapy, and then they could then just uh, send those people, or give them a reference to another clinic or doctor, or to somebody that's in that level of care, or somebody that specializes in that area or that field. So that's what I was thinking, is you start with this simple general everyday mental health care, for kind of hopefully getting us as a nation in a better state, and for destigmatizing some of the stigma that exists around mental health care, and for making sure that it's accessible to everybody. Okay. And I know, so I was thinking, yeah, I already said schools and employment. I also thought churches would be a good area. I know some religious people may not agree with some of that, but I think that that could be a good way to reach certain people. You could also have people available at like community centers. You could have some of our regular places that people go to, like libraries and stuff like that, who at least have information. They could give you a connection. They could say, hey, we have these classes going on here, or we have this support group that goes on here, or we have this doctor that deals with your specific area. If there's more information available just in our regular community areas, where those people in our communities could actually um, uh, just direct you to where to go and who to talk to, or direct you to available resources within the community. I think that would be beneficial, and that could be that first level of care. And then after that, you have next level of care, where maybe those people at the first level of care notice some flags. Maybe they noticed some challenges, or there was a particular issue that they didn't feel that they had the training and ability to help you with, and then they could refer you on to a slightly higher level of care, where they can address more specific issues, where they can address challenges that maybe um, that first level of healthcare was not able to address. Um, Things like that. And then you could have your third level of care, which I would say would be the last level of care, would be your more stringent problems, your people with actual psychosis, your people that are in more dangerous situations, your people that have more extreme mental health care needs, and you could have them in that third level, which would be more extreme. And let me see, I don't want to go too far, so okay. All right, so for that first level of care, I said for general mental health. I also explained that already. Uh, Individual and group concerns. So if it's kind of a general healthcare thing, but maybe you have certain individual concerns, maybe you have certain group concerns, but they're not anything major, that would be, I think, an appropriate thing for a simple first level mental health care needs. Um, Transition periods, like if you are moving, if you're changing where you're working, if you're going from middle school to high school, you're going from high school to college, or to a job, or whatever. I mean, going from high school to being graduated and being considered old enough to take care of yourself, to being considered um, at a point where you can be legally independent. I think that's a very important transitional period, and it can be very challenging for some people, for the children that are going through it, or the young adults that are going through it, and for their parents who are trying to get them over this bridge between being at home and being taken care of by your parents, and versus being more independent and taking care of yourself. Um, and then you have other family challenges that could come up. And then, like I said, to address warning signs and symptoms. So let's say you don't think it's that big a deal, but maybe you go and talk to the therapist, but the therapist um, is concerned, or the therapist doesn't have adequate training for exactly what you are being challenged with, then maybe then you could move up to that second level of care. Okay. All right. And then one of the things that I was thinking is that you're going to need extra outreach for those people that are hard to reach. So your rural areas where there's not a lot of coverage, we need to find ways to reach out to those people, to get them the coverage they need, to find maybe alternative ways to reach them, because taking the time to go to a therapist um, multiple times a month, sometimes multiple times a week, that takes a lot of time. And in a rural area, you may have to drive quite far to get to them. I know there are some therapy options that are available now. They're available online. Sometimes you can access some therapy over the phone. So maybe we need to reevaluate some of the ways those people who are in more isolated areas are better able to access the kind of therapy that they need without the place that they're living in keeping them from accessing important mental health care. And you also have isolated groups that are isolated because of who they are, because of the situations that they're dealing with. Maybe because they have a specific, neurological issue. Maybe because they have a specific marginalized identity. Those people may be harder to reach. Some of it will be because of the area that they live in, because the area that they live in may not have access to the kind of care that they need, but some of them will be hard to reach because of the situation they're in. Even if they're not in a hard to reach geographical area, they may be isolated. They may feel isolated. They may feel socially awkward. They may not be okay with talking to other people about their issues. They may be stuck at home. If they are not independent and they're being taken care of by somebody else, then they may be isolated by the people that are caring for them. And so I think there need to be ways that we can reach out to those people and find ways to reach them, ways that they can use to access mental health care, ways that maybe they're a little more comfortable accessing mental health care, so that they wouldn't be so isolated and they wouldn't be so in such a difficult situation, and they wouldn't be so hard to reach. Okay, so that's one of the things that I think is very, very important. All right. Specialized care needs more training and greater access. Okay, so this I did talk a little bit about this, but if you're in a specialized care area, you are providing care for a specific type of group or for a specific mental health issue or specific disorder or just a specific population, that there needs to be comprehensive training in your schooling that really, really focuses on those areas and really gives you good training on how to serve them, how to ensure that you are considering their autonomy, that you're giving them the autonomy that they need, but that you are also addressing their mental health care concerns and that you are addressing their special needs effectively. Because like I said, even though you would think that certain things are automatically going to be covered in schools, there are several marginalized groups of people where you go and look through the curriculum of schools and find that in fact that stuff is not easily accessible, that stuff is not well taught in schools, and some of it is not taught at all. So I think that needs to be a big focus, is making sure that if you are a mental health therapist that is going to work with a certain identity of people, if you're going to work with a certain marginalized group of people, if you're going to work with a certain specific mental health challenge, that you are very well trained on that, both in school and for professional development that you get later on. That training needs to keep on going after you've been through school and after you've gone through all the education and you've gone through your supervised employment and all of that, supervised counseling, that you're still getting training because things advance, things change. We get new types of healthcare. We find out new things. Data comes out, and we find out things that we once thought uh, were definitely true. We come to find out that they're not actually true at all. There's some things that we um, at one time thought that this is completely wrong, and then data comes out, and we find out that actually we were on to something. So these are things that we really need to make sure that, as advances are made, as research shows that certain things need to change, that the people that are providing healthcare, mental health care, are being properly trained, even if they graduated from school decades ago. All right. Okay. All right. And I think I went I went past where I was going. So this is something I'm gonna have to work on. I know I have to work on looking at the camera and not looking all around, but I also have to work on not jumping past where I wanted to go and just talking about everything. So some of the things that that I have here for making mental health more accessible for employment. So this was, yeah, I think I already talked about this. Specialized training for identifying challenges, training and working on simple issues, stress and resilience and coping. So stress, resilience, and coping, I think this is really important. This is something that I dealt with a lot when I was working with substance use addiction and domestic violence, is this ability to handle stress, the ability to cope when things happen. Okay, because I spent a lot of time talking about that upper, that lower level, simple level of care where you're just dealing with everyday challenges. But there are a lot of people that go through trauma, that go through really, really horrible, tragic events that are really hard to deal with, and they need to be able to cope with the trauma that is going to exist because of the situations they went through. So that's one thing that I think any therapist is going to need to have really good training on is um, is working with the people they're providing therapy and counseling and help with, uh, working with them on stress, working with them on coping with traumas, with triggers. And when somebody says trigger, it doesn't mean just something they're offended by. A trigger is something that it could occur from any part of your senses, your sense of touch, your sense of smell, your sense of taste, a memory of something that happened, a word or phrase, a song. There is almost anything could trigger basically a traumatic event. It could be a traumatic event. It could be a moment where you got really ill. It could be a moment of addiction. It could be something that, um, when this happens, you're more likely to do this, which is more likely to make you want to go to a certain drug and make you fall back into those addictive patterns. Okay, so making sure that the therapists that are providing therapy are very well trained on working through your regular stress, working through coping with regular stress, and working through coping with traumatic events. Um, that's very important. Okay, and then referring out for your more complex, challenging struggles. So yeah, next time I'm going to definitely have to. Hello, that's my husband, Craig Brown. You can say hi or bye or whatever, but anyway, so yeah, just make sure that they can handle all this stuff. And resilience is very important. Okay, this is like your ability to to get through those challenging situations. Okay. And maybe at one time we thought some people are just resilient and some people aren't. You can't do anything about it, but that's not true. There are things you can do even for people that are not resilient to help build their resilience, to help create more resilience in them. And so that's something that I think they need to be very well trained on. All right. Okay, have already access training for specialized care and during autonomy. Okay, so for your higher levels of care, this is, like I said, I already talked about a lot of this, making sure that they're able to address specific populations, that if they are trained to work with a certain population, that they have very good training on working with that. Thank you, Charity. Charity said hi and bye to Craig. Um, Making sure that they're able to work with those people from specific populations, that they have good training. Complex issues and emergency trauma events, which I had just talked about. So they need to be able to very well address those emergencies, and especially so like the shootings that just happened in Uvalde. A therapist dealing with that is going to need to have special training on how to deal with like so many people being traumatized all at once, and not with something little, something that is really, really life changing and could really, really cause a lot of developmental harm. And especially these are kids, so they need to be well versed on how to provide mental health therapy for kids that have just gone through really traumatic situation. So yeah, comprehensive training on identifying and working with very traumatized populations. Specialized comprehensive training on coping that is both negative and positive. So some people think of coping as um, only being for things that are really, really hard, but sometimes you have to cope with things that are good too. So, so some training on dealing with that too. And also, I think what I actually meant by this, so my mistake, what I actually meant by that, comprehensive training on coping, both negative and positive, which means that sometimes when traumatic things happen, people use whatever they can to cope. And sometimes those coping mechanisms are really, really negative and really unhealthy. And sometimes those coping mechanisms are very beneficial and they are very healthy. So they need to have comprehensive training on identifying both of them and kind of providing care that will help them to access more positive forms of coping skills, and hopefully start to gradually step away from those more negative coping skills. So those negative coping skills, they also become habit because you start doing them, you get used to them. And this isn't just with drugs, this is with anything. You start intentionally doing this thing because you're in a really bad place and you feel really awful and you want the pain to stop, and so you start doing these things that aren't good for you, that are negative, that are bad for you, that can cause you more mental health problems, that can cause you more physical problems. um, and so even if it's not addiction to drugs, you still form these habits where you're just automatically doing these things that aren't good for you. And so the therapist needs to be able to help you step away from that and gradually get to where you are using positive coping skills in order to deal with the trauma. And those kind of traumas, they don't just go away. They exist. They continue on. They can continue on. Sometimes they can continue on for a week or two. Sometimes they continue on for a month. Sometimes they go for months, sometimes years and decades. Okay. These, some of the most tragic, traumatic events do not go away. Some of them will kind of eat at you for the rest of your life. So you need to have good, positive coping skills in order to handle that when those things come back up. I've had sexual trauma myself, where for a long time I thought I was okay. I thought I had dealt with what I needed to do. And mind you, I never went to a therapist. I never actually went to a counselor for this. But I thought I was okay. I thought I was dealing with everything fine. And as the years have gone on, as I have gotten older and I have dealt with more things, I found later on that I was not actually okay, that this stuff comes back up. It comes back up, it eats at me, and so I have to deal with it again. And that's one thing that I am grateful that I do now have therapists that I can go to, that I can talk to about this when I really, really need to. Um, but yeah, it doesn't just stop, it keeps on going. Let's see, comprehensive training on building resilience. So I already talked about building resilience. And then more stringent care and security for high. Okay, so when I was talking about that third level, higher level of care, okay, there are some situations that can be dangerous. There are some populations that can be dangerous, but there can also be certain events that occur that can be dangerous, and this exists within those some of those really traumatic events that sometimes happen. Um, uh, Even if it's something some people deal with okay, they're not in a dangerous situation. There are some times where that trauma is so severe that um, it can cause you to be in a really bad position. You're more likely to want to commit suicide. You're more likely to strike out at other people that you love and care about. You're more likely to lose control. And so what I have for um, for this particular group, severe mental illness, um, drug and alcohol overdose, that can be very dangerous situation. Situations of domestic violence, assault, and other violent issues. So if you're in the middle of those issues, you're dealing with them, sometimes there probably needs to be a little bit of a higher level of security when handling those situations, because domestic violence can get really ugly, and people that abuse other people, they can use a lot of tactics that you might not even think of, that can be very dangerous for the person they are abusing, for their children, for I mean, it can get as bad as it can actually be dangerous for the people that they work with. It can be dangerous for the people who are in their circles. So that's something that you need to that would need to be considered, is that populations in those areas, I wouldn't say all of them need extra security, but there probably should be some attention paid to certain situations if they start to look sticky, especially if you're a mental health therapist and you have to work with traumatized individuals every day. Then there are definitely situations that you have to be careful of, both with your patients and with your patient's loved ones, the people that care about them or that don't care about them. You need to be careful for suicide watch and extreme reactions to trauma and grief. So that's what I was talking about earlier. If you go through trauma, some people are okay. They can deal with, probably that second level of care, but there are some people that get themselves in, that their reactions are so extreme or so difficult to handle that maybe they do need that higher level of security. All right. All right. All right. Okay, so I'm going to ask another question. Let's let's see, the last one, what about healthcare needs to be addressed? Okay, so this one is, could we get free universal healthcare approved? Okay, do you think that voters would be willing to do the work that they would need to do to actually get something like this approved, to get a free, comprehensive mental health care system approved? Would the government and the powers that be that are in charge, that make legislation, that make the regulations, that set up the education and the system, the employment, and all of that, would we be able to get the coverage that we would need from voters, the government, and the people in positions of power to actually make that happen? Okay, so let's put that in my comment section, and if you want to answer, feel free. Paste. And I'll put it also in my YouTube that has no video showing. Now, my understanding is that I can go back later and put the video into the YouTube, edit it and add the video that I'm recording on Facebook probably to this. I would probably need some way to edit it. I'm not sure. I know I can download videos from my computer onto YouTube. I've done it before. So hopefully I'll be able to fix that. But I got that question in there. All right. And I am coming to the end of this. I know I've been going on for a while, so let's hurry it up. Okay. All right. Yeah, I am coming to the end of this. Okay, so now my last question, how can it get the coverage, the investment, and the buy-in needed? Okay, because something really big and comprehensive like that is not going to work, or not going to work well, if you don't have the buy-in. So like I asked before about, whether the voters are going to approve something like that, if the government or the powers that be are going to approve something like that, how can we get the coverage and the investment and the buy-in from everybody that would be needed in order to make something like that work? Because if the people that need to use it aren't buying into it, they don't agree with it, they don't like it, or they don't understand it, they're less likely to use it. It's less likely to work. If the people that are trying to cover it, the employees that are in the system, the everybody that has to work within that system, the people that are funding this, the politicians that would have to get involved, if they aren't buying into the system, it's not likely to work. And I know we have certain politicians that it's very hard to get stuff like that through, but it's definitely something that we would need to consider. We need to find a way. How do we get them to cover this? Where do we come up with the money? How are we as a nation able to pay for this? And especially when our thinking tends to devolve to, oh, we don't have the money, we don't have the resources, it's socialism, we can't do that because it's socialism. How do we do that? How do we get people to change their thinking on that? How do we get people to be willing to invest in that? I think in the long run, it would actually save a lot of money and it would save a lot of lives. But you still need the coverage. You need the investment in money and resources. If you don't have that, then the system is not likely to work, and you need the buy-in from every branch of that system in order for it to actually work well. So let me get that last question in there. Copy, paste. All right, and in my YouTube, paste, enter. Over an hour in. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I will try very, very hard next time to not get so off track and not go way ahead. So I'm not repeating myself because I know that is a problem. And I am going to try harder to look at the camera more because I know that is something that that I've definitely heard a lot of feedback that I need to look at the camera, I need to not look around as much, that kind of thing. And I know that I tend to jump the gun and just keep on going and going and going. So I'll have to do a better job at keeping track of that. Okay, so it's time to go. I'll see you next week. And what I plan on talking about next week is the increased political and legislative attacks on our basic rights. So this is something that I've been noticing lately. And so I think a little talk about this, like what we're seeing, some of the things that we're seeing, these attacks on just our basic rights, and you know what we can do about it, where it's coming from. I think that's very important. So let me put that in. I will put this also in my comments. Let me, probably not. My husband says that people, okay, I'm reading Charity's comment. She says, probably not. My husband says that people in power are not willing to do more than paycheck covers. And I agree. I definitely agree. Laugh out loud. And people are not ready for higher inflation that it would require. Yes, and we're seeing that now, definitely. But the idea is good. We as a society are strapped for cash due to the rising costs of a few things at the moment. If grants or donations were the financial basis, then universal health care would be ideal. But then how well and what would it cover? Yeah, I agree with you. Yep, yep. Okay, so let's see. We're gonna put topic for next week. Okay. And paste. All right. So our topic for next week is increased political legislative attacks on our basic rights. All right, let me put that in. Let me post that on Facebook, enter, and put it in my YouTube, enter. And if any of you are on here, let me see if I can get a link to this. Let me just get a link to my regular YouTube channel. I'll just put my YouTube channel in there since the scheduled streams have not been working well. I'll put my YouTube channel in there. And if you are on here, please go to my YouTube channel and click subscribe so that I can have more than 3 subscribers on my YouTube channel. All right, so let's see. I think this is it. So go. Nope, that one. Your channel. All right, so copy. I'm going to put my YouTube channel in the comments section. All right. My YouTube. It says YouTuber. My YouTuber channel. My YouTube channel. All right. All right. Copy and paste that. Enter. All right, so that's my YouTube channel. You can go over there and just give me a subscribe. You don't have to like it right now because my video isn't on there. But I mean, I guess if it's playing the audio, you could put a like. I would probably put a dislike if it was me. I'd go in there and I'd be like, this is not even showing audio. Why would I want anything to do with it? It's not supposed to be a podcast. I do eventually want to do a podcast, but right now I'm just doing these videos until I get something set up. So anyway, I think that's it. I'm pretty sure. Let's see. It's time to go. So yeah, I'll see you next week. Everybody enjoy your weekend. Um, have fun and and please come to my YouTube channel and press subscribe. Thank you. And now I will end my video. Bye.